All right. So I'm Jerusha Graham, the museum coordinator at the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking. And I'd like to say welcome to Harnessing the Power of Animation for Social Change, presented by Marissa Ginger Tantavitong, the executive director of Asifa South. This presentation is part of Fast Film Fest, which is a festival put on by the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking, along with Georgia Tech Libraries in Asifa South. Fast Film Fest is original animated films that are 5 seconds to 5 minutes long. They're primarily made from paper, and it's free to participate. You don't have to have any experience. We've got lots of great resources online if it's your first time making a stop motion animation. And then we share these films via a screening, and we also post them online on our YouTube channel. So I'm just going to play this little video. It's 4 seconds, so you can kind of see the the length. It's Fast Film Fest. It's not very long. We really want you to feel comfortable giving it a try. So this year's theme is Community, the World as We Know It. And our submission deadline is March 5th. So you have about a week and a half to do a little animation if you're interested. I'm going to introduce Ginger. So Marissa Ginger Tantavitong is an Oscar long-listed animation short director and filmmaker in residence with the Atlanta Film Society, graduating from Savannah College of Art and Design with an MFA in animation and a Bachelor of Technology in Computer Graphics and Multimedia. She is interested in blending technology and tradition to create experiences. She is the current executive director of Asifa South, International Animation Society, the Southern U.S. chapter, and is responsible for spearheading their brand identity since 2014. Tantavitong also serves as a strategy advisor to SIGGRAPH, the leading conference of graphics and technological advancement in the world. She makes it a priority to know what is forefront and upcoming in the technology world and looks for ways to efficiently integrate it into her work. And if you want to check out more of her work, her website there is on the screen. I'm going to turn it over to Ginger.
Hello, thank you, Jerusha, and thank you to the Paper Museum for putting up on this event. It's been an honor. We've also participated last year as well with the Asifa International Animation Society. So for those of you who don't know me and this is your first time actually meeting me online, I am the executive director of Asifa South, and Asifa South is an international animation society. Ours is headquartered in Atlanta, and we kind of cover the South. And our mission is to better the industry as well as create more educational courses for those who are in the emerging early careers and interested in animation. So our primary focus is to build a community around animators, working with other different organizations in film and game development to bring together the idea that, animation is an important medium. It is a part of film, and it should definitely be discussed as well, too. So based on today's topic, harnessing the power of animation for social change, it's definitely one thing that I have a really big passion for as well too, because the reason that I'm going to start a little bit about the reason I got into animation in the first place as well too. So initially when I was younger, I actually read a lot of comic books, mostly Japanese comic books like called manga, and I watch a lot of anime as well too. And it's always been a thing that inspired me. As a kid, I've always watched things like before Pokemon, there was like a whole range of animation and such as like Nightmare Before Christmas or The Lion King. And a lot of times, the stories that come out of these animation end up inspiring me a lot. There are a lot of the themes that happen inside of the types of manga that I read had to do with heroes. And heroes, a lot of times, came in different ways. So usually, there's the American type of superhero in the traditional sense before of Superman versus Batman or DC Marvel type of thing. But a lot of the mangas that I was reading was more about people who were ordinary people, and a lot of times they were going through some type of hardship, or they were kind of starting out early in their journey. One particular comic that I really liked was called Whistle, and it was about a boy who was very short, but he wanted to be in a soccer team. So he persevered and he practiced every day until he got the acceptance of his friends. And I think one of the things, every time I was feeling kind of like down, or when I was going through school and I felt that I wasn't doing good enough, that comic was a comic that I kept reading over and over. And I felt like, hey, if this guy, even though it's a fictional character, who is, 140 centimeters, I don't know how many foot that is, but that's considerably considered short in the cartoon, is able to persevere and able to gain the trust of their friends and build camaraderie, the type of friendship that bounds together, then I felt like I wasn't alone. I felt like that was something that helped me through, and it was a motivational figure, even if it wasn't a real person to me. And I feel like that's something that starting at a younger age, the anything that you read, anything that you watch definitely has a big influence on you, especially the people around you as well too. And in certain cases, also the people who aren't around you. So a lot of times when we're looking at animation, in the and in its mainstream format, a lot of people think about animations for kids. And that's the case where we're looking at animation coming out from Pixar, from Disney, from DreamWorks that are more mainstream and commercial. And it usually has that feel-good feeling, and it also comes off as something that's a little bit more mainstream. But also, we look at the other side of the end, and when we're looking at the different comics that are coming nowadays, and in this type of day and age as well too, we're starting to see more topics broaching around the identity of gender, more things about that are slice of life, and the topics are very, very varied. And growing up with anime and manga, it wasn't just like Naruto that a lot of people see here. There's a lot of slice of life animation as well too, and a lot of like comics that address different types of topics. So I think one of the things is that starting from talking about social changes, that comes in talking about animation as a medium for social change, but not necessarily animation in its own genre as a whole different thing from filmmaking. Because at the heart of filmmaking, at the heart of a lot of books, at the heart of a lot of games, it's all about the story. And the story that comes across is usually what touches people and what resonates. Animation, though, happens to be a medium that is very interesting in terms of diversified storytelling. One of the things that I always bring up is that when I'm talking about animation is who comes to me for animation and usually why. A lot of times there is, the typical corporate video explainer when we're talking about things like TEDx. There's like short little narratives that people usually use animation for, or we're looking at concepts that are more abstract and people want to use animation for that, or they want to turn a story that might have more violence or more emotional type of notes that if you put into film, it's very hard to swallow. And I think this is a topic that a lot of animators and professors in animation school like to talk about as well too, is that sometimes animation is such a great medium for storytelling because it is able to help people digest things that you may not be able to in live action. For example, one of my favorite animation itself is Grave of the Fireflies. And for those of you who don't know Grave of the Fireflies, it is an animation that is based on war. And it's a wartime animation about a couple of siblings as they struggle through the hardship. And there is death, and there is a lot of things that if you look inside of live action, this is not something probably people would think would be great for kids to watch. However, on another note is that it is something that it is easier to stomach when you're going through these characters, because on one hand there is the feeling that you can travel through the journey with them, but on the other hand you also feel that they're not any one person. There's in real life who is affected in terms of in that particular animation. The characters themselves are affected in the story, but after you watch the story, there is a sense of way to kind of detach yourself, to feel that there is not an identity of a person, even if the story is inspired by true events as well too, that you're following the journey on and actually feeling that they're going through like the pain in a way that you can't help them as well too. Because when we're talking about stories that are more emotional, sometimes there are arcs that you go through and the feeling of helplessness can also be there as well too. So I think that's one case of example of an animation that for me it's a very very big topic, and then but it's something that is able to be diluted and digested better when it comes to the use of animation. The other thing about animation too is that when we're looking at storytelling, a lot of different types of medium like podcasts, or if we're looking at things that when you're explaining in different like storybooks, animation is a very visual medium, and there is the ability to put anyone and anything into animation. For example, we're talking about live action. There's a lot of times you have to cast the people, that the actors and actresses that are going to be in the film. So in a sense, when you're casting somebody who actually exists, there is an association with that person in real life. However, in animation, that association is not there. It's like a newly created character. Sometimes you can associate them with voice acting, the voice actors, the voice actresses, but it's not going to be the same as if you had, for example, Keanu Reeves. And every time you look at a character on the screen, instead of seeing another character, you kind of still feel that there's like, oh, it's Keanu Reeves acting as this particular character as well too. But for animation, that is a little bit completely gone. Like the character itself has its own life. When we're looking at some things like the like Disney's version of Snow White, or we're looking at Cinderella, then we see that character as that particular character as well too. So why is it now that a lot of times too that in this particular time during the pandemic, a lot of people are now very interested in animation as a storytelling tool. And that's definitely because it's a lot harder to get on set and do live action at the particular moment. And one of the projects that we are particularly working ourselves on is actually the filmmakers had a grant from the Ford Foundation. And it is, and for those of you who don't know what the Ford Foundation is, it's a foundation that usually fights for a shift in narrative for justice and equality as well too. So they give out a lot of different grants that can help like filmmakers. And in this particular case, the filmmaker that we're working with, a whole group, they got together and they're talking about housing inequality. But when we're talking about housing inequality, it's not just a straightforward animation where it's like, oh, this is what happens, this is stuff. This is actually taking a core belief that you believe in. For example, if you're believing in things about people should be paid more in terms of wage and talking about equality, it's not just giving that information straight up. It's more like creating a world building so that people actually are able to relate and feel like they're a part of an environment that is surrounded by that particular core value. So a lot of times when you're looking at animation, movies, or just storytelling in general, it's not as much about the shoving message into people's face as much as creating a way to gain interest and bring interest into the particular topic, as well as to create a world building that can help lead people to empathize more with that particular topic or particular subject. Recently as well too, I had a friend who was talking about a feature film being funded by certain projects, but they're not trying to emphasize the the particular industry that it's in, like real estate, but what they're particularly trying to emphasize more is on the themes of what they're trying to create, like the themes of unity, the themes of community. That is definitely something that I feel like in the past recent years have become a bigger issue and a bigger interest point for a lot of people. And if anybody have any questions and wanted to insert any of your own comments as well too, please do, because I have my chat up here with me as well too. But in this particular case, the one thing that is coming up a lot is we've been seeing a lot of shifts where people are more interested now than ever in using animation, not to just tell stories that are safe, but stories that are also more controversial. And animation is definitely a medium that helps with this because, again, like I mentioned, there is no one person attached to it. You can create a whole new character to actually bring forth what you're trying to talk about. And you can create a whole world that is like very appealing in terms of visually to any age group, depending on what your focus is. So in this particular case too, just like today, I was reading through an article, and the Smithsonian actually has a film festival called the Mother Tongue Festival, and they actually created a playlist of animations that talked about the different cultures, from the indigenous identity as a central theme as well too. And they've included works from different regions such as Australia, Canada, Chile, Indonesia, Mexico, United States, and these are all told in different types of medium and forms as well too. Sometimes like music video, sometimes the styles are very different as well too. And this style is the ability to also transfer cultural identity. So what I mean here is, for example, if you're looking at live action, you might have, a person, and you can build a world that looks like that particular style. But when you're using animation, you're able to insert like symbolic motifs into the animation. And the stylization look, you can make it look a little bit more like the drawings that come from different tribes, or you can also make references to the particular era as well too by using graphic design on it. I think one of the films that the Atlanta Film Society actually presented last year that is on the Oscar short list is called the Kape Mahu. And I'm going to just put that into the chat so you guys can also follow along with that as well too. But for that one, it's about a fourth spiritual being of dual masculinity and feminine energy traveling from Tahiti to Waikiki many years ago, bringing with them healing art that bless the people of Hawaii. And internally grateful for the healing ability, the people of Waikiki erected a monument to honor these incredible individuals. So now we're able to use animation to resurrect stories of the past, especially animated like shorts. For a lot of people who are more used to the commercial world, I've gotten this comment from a lot of people that says, "Oh, animation all kind of look the same nowadays. They all have the same style, like the Pixar style, the Disney style, the Cartoon Network style, the Adventure Time style. They all look the same." However, one thing I always try to tell people as well is because those are commercialized animation, there are a lot of animated shorts out there, so many of them, and they have so many different styles. They touch on so many different stories and so many different notes because a lot of the animated shorts that come out are often made by people who are putting their personal stories into it, or they're talking about things they care about. So this comes into the point where we're talking about, mainstream versus indie. My suggestion is always that, film festivals nowadays are online too. There's a lot of people releasing their animation on Vimeo. They're releasing it on YouTube. It is definitely a great place to start looking into different diverse stories. If you're interested in stories that are not always about, a character who finds a journey to do something, but more so about cultural references, points and moments in time, or like personal touch stories, the animated short circuit is a very great place to actually look for. It's definitely got a diverse range of use of stop motion techniques, and also like 2D animation, 3D animation. And 3D animation don't always look like the type of animation you would see on commercial either, because nowadays there are so many different techniques that are being used, and people are really being exploratory with it, especially if it's coming from different regions. Another thing that I wanted to touch about is the cultural aspect of things. So recently, we just had an interview with one of the studios in the Philippines called the Rocket Sheep Studio, and they created an animation called Hayopka, which is actually like their slang of a swear word. And this animation is actually their first feature animation to come out of the Philippines. It's very fascinating because it integrated a lot of the culture of soap opera and stuff as well too. Because when we're looking at the animation that comes out, you also have to look at the creators. And it was such an interesting story when I was talking with the director, because he said that it took them almost 12 years to make this animation because it came out of their own what's it called, like hardship. They actually didn't have any funding for that as well too, and then they were putting that into festival circuits until it finally got picked up by Netflix. But one of the things that happens with that was that they didn't want Netflix to actually have the worldwide access, because they still wanted to also be able to, hopefully when everything gets better, put it on the big screen as well too, and have it in the theaters. So not giving out universal right. But one of the questions that came in from people who were interested in this particular studio and this particular film as well too is the fact that they were asking, is there any cultural references or influences in the animation? And the whole animation is actually full of cultural influences from the Philippines, because there is in Southeast Asia, we do have a culture of soap operas, and our animation sometimes is very not as good. I'm going to say this, not going to be as accepted in the US because of how there is a lot of material that we can be ignorant about as well too. So coming from Thailand, for example, there were a lot of things I didn't realize when I got to in the US. And one of the examples for starters was my friend Tam. My friend Tam is Black, and she has really cool braids and everything too. And the first time I came over, I was like, whoa, that is amazing. Can I touch it? And I just went ahead and touched her hair. And I know a lot of you are probably cringing right now if you know why. But that is definitely something you shouldn't do. And also, it's definitely something that, culturally, for me, being a very touchy-feely person, and in Thailand, the privacy bubble it's a lot smaller. But then when it comes to the things that you should be acceptable or not in the U.S. versus in other parts of the country, that's a learning experience. And this is what animation can actually bring in as well too, is that cultural reverency. Because sometimes when you see things, then you can also address whether it's right or wrong. But it's not just that. There's a lot of gray areas, because in terms of cultural context, not just geographically different, because some people might say, hey, there's the internet. Why don't you should be more educated? You should know better. However, when you're putting people into their own society and their own cultural context as well too, it comes to this question where what is acceptable in one society and what is considered rude in another society is not the same. But if there is a point of reference where we can come together and do discussions, then that is the important part. Like, for example, Raya, the Disney film about the Southeast Asian warrior, that is something that we actually had a discussion at me and around 5, 6 other Southeast Asian folks. We did a Zoom call together, and we were just discussing Raya and saying, like, hey, what our thoughts are about it, because it does incorporate a lot of different parts of Southeast Asia. And we were saying, like, hey, where is this from? But also how we felt about it. And there was a lot of different mixed feelings, because, it's just a trailer. You can't really judge much on a trailer. But also it was a lot of excitement. The excitement that comes from the fact that people are going to be seeing representation on the screen. And I think a lot by now, 2021, it is definitely a thing where representation on screen makes a big difference. So when we're actually seeing it, we're saying, hey, this is not just Asians, as in like, the Chinese, Japanese, the East Asian representation, but Southeast Asian, because there's this thing in Southeast Asia as well too, where the color of your skin is also like determined of like people looking and saying, oh, are you from a higher class society or a lower class society? And there's a lot of like subtle racism that is a part of the inherent nature of the whole um, kind of society. Just because, for one, a lot of the places are homogenized as well too. Because in Thailand, we have a lot of expats, but that doesn't mean that we have a lot of Black people as well too. And also in Japan, you'll see that majority of people are from Japan, while as like there's going to be people from different culture coming in, but a majority of people are still Japanese. So what a lot of things that we see in terms of representation comes from is Hollywood. And a lot of times when we look or at our own representation of the type of animation content that is coming out from our own country as well too, there's a lot of censorship that goes on in Thailand about the type of animation that comes out. Oh, the animation needs to be proper. It has to be a certain type of uh, uh, censorship to it. So in this particular case, when we're looking at this in cultural context in terms of sharing, the fact that now that Netflix has really kind of helped, and not just Netflix, but Crunchyroll or even the pirated site Kiss Anime has made anime into something that is a little bit more mainstream, is definitely about sharing more of the culture. And I feel that a lot of like the international studios that we talk to, they are aware that their own studio has to kind of abide by their own geography as well too. When we're looking at this in terms of understanding whether something comes out to social change and actually driving that, there is not just the fact that we're looking at this climate where everything is going is changing along, but also that where we're looking at animation in itself. You can see that if you look at Netflix right now and you scroll through, it has become something that is an accepted medium, not just for kids. There's now like a lot of mediums that are for adults, adult animation content as well too. But in the U.S., if you look at the traditional path of adult animation, a lot of them, and this might just be me, can come off a little bit more raunchy, and they can come off a little bit more like South Park or a Family Guy. But now we're seeing more animation that aren't just raunchy or adult humor, but is considered okay and more inclusive to a lot of different people. Like the Willoughbys, for example, that was a very good animation as well too. So I think one of the things when we're talking about harnessing the power of animation is the awareness that animation itself is it does influence the people who sees it, but not just that too. It does influence the people who are going to want to work in it. It does influence the next generation of people who are going to become storytellers, and and this is something that for me, I feel that with the Asifa and everything that we're trying to do is we're not trying to make a change with just the animation that for the people who are watching it, but also the people who want to get into the industry. Because essentially, again, it's all about storytelling. And the more storyteller you have who have authentic experience or are open to getting advices, that's when we have more stories that are reflective of a global community and a better like canvas of a picture that we actually see. So I think that's basically in a nutshell what I wanted to talk about in terms of harnessing the power of animation. But I would love to hear people's thoughts about this as well too, because for me, that's a starting point. We want to have more conversations around how we can better make animation a part of something that is more accessible, since the medium itself. I've noticed that a lot of neurodivergence and a lot of introverts are also very drawn to this medium as well too. So, Jerusha, are we able to open this conversation to people, or are they just watching?
I think we might be able to. Let's try it.
Hi, sorry, I didn't know my hand was up. I'm not sure how I can control that, but I do have a question. about animation and kind of social change. And I'm curious about like the timeline. So I know a lot of animated works take so long, right? Like sometimes like a decade. Um, and so I'm wondering how people in the field are, how do you address like current challenges when you know that your work is not maybe not going to be seen by people for 5 to 7 years? Is that a conversation that people are having to
Yes.
kind of timeless work?
Yes, definitely. And I think you've actually nailed one thing in the head, though, is that a lot of the comments about why animation is a pretty good medium is because there's a lot, it's pretty abstract. And there is a timelessness to a lot of animation where you're able to create that because it's like the look and the feel, it can get very unique. As your question as to the timeline, yeah, if we're looking at commercial animation, yes, sometimes it can take 3 to 4 years, and that's a long time to address things. But in terms of the core theme, if you realize a lot of core themes still don't change, which it's about like the community. It's about trying to create this sense of person fighting for something they believe in. And a lot of the core themes, like for example, Zootopia, it's pretty timeless. You can take it back to before where it's like two people are different, but we're trying to kind of work together to be in a society where we accept each other. That core theme seems to be one thing that over time, like issues can change, but the problem itself is a timeless one as well too. Uh, However, that's why a lot of people who are actually in the industry also make animated shorts on the side because the animated shorts do take a lot less time. You can make an animated short, for example, with stop motion. You can take a couple of weeks to do that, or some people can take a couple months to do their own passion animation. The one that I told you about, the Hayopka one, that they took 12 years, but they also said, wow, like we persevered mainly not because we were hardworking or anything, but because we were too naive. So we were like, oh, we already finished, like, finished part of it. Maybe we keep going, and we keep going as well too. Um, but in that sense, like when we're looking at animation that are a bit older, you can definitely see that it is influenced by the time as well, where, the older Disney versions are pretty racist. And how they deal with that is they put a disclaimer in the front. But on the belief for me is that we should be addressing those things where, hey, how did this particular era affect this type of animation and why it comes out in terms of the representation and kind of like see if we can do better. However, I don't believe that we should change the old animation because that means that we're kind of erasing the history of the archive that something ever happened. But definitely, I think a lot of people also pay homage as well too to previous and older types of animation as well, where sometimes they will make it in the same style, or sometimes they will take certain characters and bring those reminiscences in as well too. So when we're talking about social change, things that are happening fast, the technique in animation is starting to become really fast. Well, not really fast, but a lot faster. But it's always this thing where people who are even in the industry still go towards making animated shorts. And they will try to put it out in the film circuit, and those are usually the animation that are more personal. So my recommendation for people is that if you really want to look at animation that is more like, for me personally, more like a lot very inspiring, very personal, film festival circuits and the ones that people post online that are personal will be one that you will see more often than if you go onto the commercial platform like Netflix or Disney Plus.
I love that. Thank you.
Yes. Is anything else? Anybody else? Hi, Anna.
Hey, we have a question in the chat from Kyra Hicks. She's asking to expand knowledge about animation projects. Can someone speak to how Wikipedia might be used to promote animation or profile animation creators?
So this is very interesting, but Wikipedia, I go on Wikipedia a lot when I'm trying to look for films and their synopsis. However, when I look at terms of animation and going to like knowing about it more in depth, I actually go to Wikia. Wikia. Wikia has a lot more to do with a lot of animation than sometimes like Wikipedia is great for the general information as well too. But could you recap that question again one more time? I think there was two parts to it. I can't really see it in the chat.
Can someone speak to how Wikipedia might be used to promote animation or profile animation creators?
Yes. Oh, perfect. Yeah. So one thing for sure is that on Wikipedia, they usually put on like people's information, the like animators such as like Studio Ghibli's or whatnot as well too. How it can actually be used to actually help profile it better. Unfortunately, you can't put on your own profile. I mean, that's a good thing and that's a bad thing. Someone else has to actually put on the profile for you to actually be on Wikipedia. But the other thing about that is that a lot of times you can actually go to Wikipedia to find out about a lot of film festivals and a lot of like different things. Like even Asifa itself, the International Animation Society, is listed on Wikipedia, and they have a lot of different chapters, and it talks about the information of how the chapter started, what the mission was as well too, and like initially, like even for Asifa itself, the initial mission was to kind of write letters to help people get out of political prison when they were talking about like with political cartoons as well too. But in terms of the archive itself, I've actually brought up Wikipedia before to one of the organizations I work with, which is the SIGGRAPH, because SIGGRAPH is a special interest group in computer graphics. And one of the things I mentioned was that SIGGRAPH has a lot of great content. They have a lot of a cutting edge technology type of content, which the information is just everywhere, but and a lot of technology debuts at SIGGRAPH. However, if you notice, like for me, who is not as tech savvy sometimes in terms of the level of knowledge that SIGGRAPH provides, because they're going to talk about AI in a very, very deep level, I felt that something like Wikipedia is actually where I usually go to find about the different topics as well too. So in that particular thing, there's a lot of research papers that are on animation, which is on the Animation Society groups and the and websites as well too, where those can actually be linked over to Wikipedia. And if we take abstracts of those and link them to the paper, I feel like this will actually help people not just have information about cartoons in its synopsis and information, but research papers that actually address things about at the animation field that will help to kind of enlighten people a little bit more about the field itself. Because when we're talking about the animation field, there's like the whole not just animation history, but there's also like the animation statistics of the what kind of medium influences animation, the psychology behind using different thesis papers on this. Like my thesis paper was on the use of stop motion as an extension of puppet therapy, for example. And it would be really nice if a lot of people actually are able to access those type of content more and realize the potential of animation and how to better use the medium. So for me, like Wikipedia is great for right as of now, highlighting people's profiles, like the animation synopsis. However, in the future, I would definitely like to see more that uses more paper citations and help to kind of bridge the gap between the psychology behind the medium of animation itself as well too. I'm not sure if that answers your question at all, honestly. If there's any comments, yes?
I actually just wanted to say that I appreciate the whole purpose and scope of your presentation. I wish that I'd had access to you and your words 5 or 6 years ago when I was talking to students about but trying to talk to students about the importance of animation. We have a couple of students in our program that were interested in animation, but primarily I want to have more conversations with students that are in art appreciation about the diversity of animation and the fact that you can use this medium, as you stated, as a way to talk about serious issues using a medium that isn't necessarily considered to be traditional, and to open up the floor for dialogue in a way that a more traditional form of artistic expressions that people are used to seeing to deal with serious issues would be used as the tool to open that door. So I appreciate you putting that out there. Like I said, I wish I had you 6 or 7 years ago, because the students obviously didn't listen to me. So maybe they would
Where
listen.
where are you teaching?
I teach at Grambling State University in North Louisiana.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you have like a multimedia program or is it a film one?
Well, it's pretty much still a traditional studio program. We just
Mm.
created a new media concentration a few years ago. It primarily focuses on animation and short film. So
Oh,
we're trying to get that off the ground, but the majority of our students are either studio or quote unquote traditional digital students. And we
Oh,
have,
no, no, that's super interesting.
so I'm trying to make it work. But we have a lot of students that are much more interested in being viewers and consumers than they are being producers. I think it's primarily because they just haven't tapped into their own personal experience and trying to figure out how to best approach the medium of animation to use that to tell their stories, right?
Definitely. I was going to mention as well too, since you brought up studio and fine art, my undergrad, not my undergrad, when I was in high school, going all the way back to high school, I was taking art classes as well too, and we had only one multimedia class, so it wasn't like an animation concentration,
Mhm.
especially in Thailand at that particular time. But one of the things that was very interesting was our professor, our teacher was we were more trained in painting and drawing and kind of oil and trying to master those techniques as well too. However, it's like one of the things that really inspired me a lot is Norman McLaren. He did a scratch on film, and he is actually like one of the founders. He's a founder of Asifa as well too as an organization. And like the medium of scratch on film is very experimental, and it's almost like taking the traditional medium and then putting it into like capturing it in camera form, and it becomes like an expansion of that media because when you're looking at traditional medium, you get like an image, you can look at it, but when you put in like animation, it increases the scope of time. And I
Mhm.
think that's a very interesting way, like for people who are interested more in just studio and fine art, because some people don't really see animation as fine art. It's more like looked at sometimes as commercial work. However, especially with the field of stop motion and a lot of places do sand painting too as well. I feel like that's something that could possibly encourage people to look into the expansion of their medium as not just something that, okay, this is a one type of art form, that's a different type of art form, but something that you can actually merge together to create uh, tell your story better,
Yeah.
to kind of expand on what you're trying to create for the viewers to look at as well. Yes, thank you for that comment. It was very an interesting take on that. Ooh, I see
And
Lisa here too. Hi. Sorry, Lisa Farrell's my producer. We love Lisa, so Lisa's here as well too. Yes.
something that you mentioned that I you noticed that a number of folks that are neurodivergent are drawn to this industry. Um, and I guess the question might be not necessarily why, but how do you see um, studios responding to or addressing the needs of those folks that are coming into the industry? Um,
So I'm gonna say it's getting better, but but in the initial phase as well too, I think this wasn't a part of the priority, which I'm glad that it's now becoming part of the priority. Because even when we're talking about working, there are some places like Exceptional Mind where they will take neurodivergence and then help them kind of train them and work on industry professional work. However, that doesn't mean that they take everybody as well too. And when we're looking at studios, one of the things like I had this concern actually, I had this concern that came in from a parent. One of the parents that I talked to actually at the beginning of the year, the pandemic, when the pandemic was happening, they were saying that their son was super concerned because their son was a neurodivergent on the spectrum. And he said that like, all the studios are now working from home. And, he wants to be able to work aspire to work in a studio and meet other people and kind of get that environment as well too because it's very hard for people to already mix and mingle, so being able to feel that you can go into a studio to kind of meet other people, it's something that was like basically what he wanted to do. And I had to kind of talk to them as well too, and said that, hey, it's possibly that there is going to be more of a temporary thing. It could come into a hybrid model as well too. But in that terms as well, there's a lot of things that we've been talking about. Is number one, especially during the pandemic, though, the pandemic has actually shone a light on studios making changes. Because prior to the pandemic itself, the studios might operate the same way, 9 to 5 or 10 hours a day, depending on whatever it is, and everybody works in the same type of pipeline. There has been like the accommodation for people with the American Disability Act, which is more focused on sometimes a lot of the physical disability as well too. But I've noticed that. And this could be anecdotal and personal, but I've also noticed that in terms of the mentality, a lot of the front is we are dealing with a lot of crunch time, where in the studios, you have to kind of sacrifice hours during the weekend or a long time to actually work on things. And with the pipeline being so fast, sometimes it's very hard to move along. And when I talk to some of our folks as well too, we're saying like, okay, some people might not like directions that are spoken. They can't keep up as fast. So a lot of the directions when it's written, it's a lot easier to follow as well too. And I feel like these conversations are starting to happen. Prior to this, it was more so we needed in and out. We need someone who can do the work. We need someone who like they need to do the work, they get the work, and then they get out. There wasn't as much as I feel like I can't say this full frontly because it wouldn't be fair to the people in the studios that are trying and have been trying. But on a general front, a lot of times it is about the work comes in, you finish the work, and you get the work out. So in terms of following, and it's like not something that was very well accommodated to begin with, because if you can't do the work and you can't keep up with the pace, they just replace you with someone else. And if it's a physical disability, usually, and it's not a hidden disability, it's easier to see, and it's easier to say, okay, this person needs a chair that that helps them with their back, and so therefore the studio can accommodate by getting you a chair. However, when it comes to hidden disability, and this happens a lot, when we for artists, I feel like, we draw a lot. So we have problems with our hands. We have problems with our backs. People have pain in so many different places. And I'm like, you haven't even reached 35 yet. And when we're talking about this too, like when people are saying, hey, can I have the ability to work from home? Then the studios prior to this would be like, but this is, things like Disney work, you have to be in the studio to actually do that. And we had like some folks who, had some pain, they had to go see the doctors and stuff. That means that during the day, they can't just come to the studio at the same 9 to 5 type of hours as well too. And that prior to this was not as accommodated for, because, crunch time, you got to get the work in, you got to get the work out. See what I mean? Yeah. But now with the pandemic type of thing, people are able to work from home, and people are realizing that, hey, it can happen. Like the myth of not being able to work from home has been dispelled. So therefore, like there is that thing where, hey, you can actually accommodate if you need to. There's not this thing where you can't. However, one of the things I will mention as well too is I do have a friend who is on the spectrum who talks to me a lot about industry. And he said he's finding it very hard to get into the industry as well too, because when he gets to the first phase of portfolios, his portfolio is great. Like he can pass the portfolio phase of the stuff, but it always seems that it's during the interview part that it kind of like that, he's always like 1 off or 2 off away from getting the particular job itself too. So that presents to me a kind of question where hey, is it just this individual, or is more than this individual, and there's something going on with the question of understanding that, hey, this person can do the job if you give them the tool. They might not do the job the same way as you expect other people to, but is there in a way that you can actually accommodate for that, versus saying, this is too much trouble for me. Because that's going to be the way that the studio works. When there's crunch time, it's going to be like, oh, is there too much trouble for me to actually have to accommodate you? And so therefore, it would be easier for me to hire someone else rather than hire you. But now I think that they are different studios are starting to recognize the strength and diversity in diversifying as well too, because it's not just about getting the work in and out, but learning to actually accommodate and to go with the back and forth conversation dialogue helps an organization to build up their communication skills. Like, it's not just in terms of neurodivergent right now as well too, but in terms of studios itself, I feel there is a very large gap in terms of building the leadership that actually cares about the people who work there. The people will care enough. But when there's problems like, assault or problems like abuse, and it's a higher up who might be performing that, and you're like, oh no, if we call them out, it's going to affect the jobs of everyone else in the studio, then it becomes a hush-hush kind of thing. And I feel that that is a very prevalent problem in the industry itself that does have to be addressed. It has to be addressed not just in the fact that, oh, people are different, should we move them in, should we move them out? It's more of there is an issue that is ongoing and has been ongoing for a long time. How do we start to step up to the plate where we can, if we have the power to do that? And we might recognize that, it's not the people who are working there's fault in terms of like the people working at the studio. Why should they also have to pay the price that this person or these organizations or higher ups are doing so and so as well too? But in essence, what I'm trying to say is there is and has been a move of awareness to understand that the output is not just the important part of the studio, but also the people who are making it as well. So I feel like it is heading towards a better step of direction, but it's also going to be about communication, and at some point, some type of regulation might be needed as well too. Yeah.
And then I had another question in that I'm curious, what would you say has been the most recent animation that you saw that you felt really had its finger on the pulse of a current issue that you really felt had a great potential to affect change in our society? Is there a specific animation that you've seen recently?
Recently, I would say it's not as recent, but because I can definitely say some animated shorts, for sure. I can't remember the exact name of it though. That's the problem. But I need to get back to you on that one, Jerusha, because I think like that is a very hard question for me, mainly because like there is a lot of animation that I think are actually building that up like now. Like for example, Zootopia. We're talking about commercial animation. When I saw Zootopia and with Asifa as well too, one of the things that we did is I took my personal money and then I rented out a theater, and then we called we went to talk to like the Drake House and all the different other foundations for families and homelessness as well too, and we said that, hey, we want to kind of open up the theater to Zootopia and have people be able to come and watch it because it's such a good film. And I felt like, kids would enjoy it, and it definitely could drive some change in their ability to think about like who they can affect as a young person, because as a younger person, even you can become a bully, but you can also not become a bully. So in terms of I'm not saying like the latest one, because like right now on the top of my mind I can't think about it, but in terms of that example, that was one of the animations in terms of mainstream that I felt like I wanted people to watch. So I definitely, like, we had around, I think, 50, 60 people come to the theater to watch Zootopia. We did like little hats and one of the sponsors actually gave us like little Zootopia's hats and stuff to give away as well too. But I think because essentially using the use of animation, they use animals. So animals are not particular to any like situation, but you can definitely see the reference that they're trying to put in of like, the discrimination or prejudice and stuff as well too. But the concept is simple enough and transferable enough that I feel like kids are able to see, this is right, this is wrong. or like, we should be kind to each other, we should build a community, and we shouldn't discriminate. And at the core center of that, I felt like the animation did a very good job with that particular one. I'm excited as well too. Like I feel like Spider-Verse also did a pretty good job with that as well too, in terms of bringing representation into character. And the story was like really nice. It was really fun. But at the core theme of it, they also brought in a lot of different types of Spider-Man from different universes, and it also delved into the fact that people watching that were not just animation fans. They were not just kids as well too, and then they were really getting into the animation of Spider-Verse itself, which I felt was pulling people into actually looking at that particular animation as a genre that they can appreciate, not just as a kids film or any film, but just as the art of animation, that particular story itself. I was like, sorry, I was like, it's such a missed opportunity that I can't think of something off the top of my head right now. But it's just like right there.
You were talking about developing the next generation of storytellers. Can you speak to how Asifa is trying to create a space that would invite voices that historically have not been included in animation?
Definitely. I think the first thing is, representation by leadership. So one of the things that we try to do is we try to cultivate leadership inside of our own committee itself. And our committee is actually made out of people who are volunteers. They start off as volunteers, and we welcome anyone to volunteer. So therefore, it's like it doesn't mean that you need to come from that school. You don't have to go to school to become a volunteer with us. But like with the dedication enough, that's when you start to become a leadership and a voice for us as well too. And inside of our committee members, we are pretty diverse. We have committee members of all like races, all genders, and we encourage them to come up with programs and ideas of what they want to see as well too. Like our programming director Cassandra, for example, came up with the idea initially before, like, she would like to see more of these type of things in programming or in workshops. Then we are like, okay, let's add those in and make sure that we reach out to places that we want to work with. Right now, we've been talking to another organization in Chicago where they have teens that are incarcerated, and then we're talking about how to create animation, work with them to kind of tell those stories as well too. And also in our incubator, we usually will try to look at, not just people's portfolios and everything, but also we ask them to write a mini essay. It's almost like a short paragraph of like, what are your, what are you trying to achieve? What are your goals and what are your dreams? But just by being in the South in general, our demographic is already like targeted not at the usual demographics that is in LA or in New York. We are targeted at the South, where a lot of people want to have the opportunity to get an animation, and usually they have to move to LA. They have to move to New York. But now, like with the people in Florida, North Carolina, Alabama, like Asifa South is something that is, we're highlighting talent that are in the South. Especially with our Southern Spotlight program, we are looking more at showing off animation that are made here and made in this particular vicinity as well too. But also when we're showcasing animation for International Animation Day or our festival, we make sure that our screening team is diverse. Like that, there are people from Iran, there are people from different races and genders, so that way they can actually look at the stories and give diverse opinions. Because like I mentioned as well too, is stories that come from different countries. Like sometimes you don't 100% get the context of it, but the core theme is there. You can see that this animation is about family, but you might not also understand the cultural context behind certain things. So therefore, the more diverse you have your screeners are, the more they can actually point these out. Like when we have a film from Iran or Middle East, sometimes we'll like ask our volunteers who are from those cultural regions to like, hey, what do you think about this animation? Like, is there any cultural context behind that we should expand on when we're talking about these animation to people and posting it out on social media? So that way people understand what the animation is about as well too. And in terms of building up like folks, like our committee itself has a lot of people who are neurodivergent as well too. So we are always asking, how can we better serve the community? How do we work with you to actually, and taking that feedback in mind, applying it over all the scale to all our activities as well too, like trying to make sure that our stuff have subtitles in them, because we know for a fact that in our Discord channel there are people who say, oh, we are hard of hearing. It's not just like a, hey, there's nobody here who's hard of hearing just because they don't say it, but when we mention that, people are like, oh, that's really great, because I have a problem trying to hear certain things as well too. And also we worked with the organization. We did a panel with Signing Animation, and Signing Animation, and Lisa was the moderator for that as well too. Very amazing. That was a fantastic panel. And with the group Signing Animation, they promote animators who are deaf or hard of hearing as well too. And they address a lot of issues about how when they go on panels, they have to have also people who are interpreters, and interpreters cost money. So when it costs money, not a lot of people try to invite them as much as it should be, because it's like, wow, we have to pay $150 to have interpreters for a couple hours. So that becomes something as well too, that you have to write into the budget to create accessibility, because a lot of times when we look at studios, it's like, oh, this is extra expense. But if you look at it from a different angle and a different perspective, accessibility is not an extra expense. It is something that, you have to kind of budget for. And that's something at our core we're trying to look at, like when we make money from our festival, where is it going to? We always say, drive it to accessibility, use it to increase, like maybe make our website a little bit more accessible, make sure that we are using Ref to make sure our Zoom meetings have closed caption. What are the simple things that we can do to make sure that this becomes something that is more accessible just in general as well?
Thank you, Ginger. I'm noticing that it is 8:05, and so we're have gone a little over. I just wanted to share my screen real quick for closeout comments. And I really appreciate you speaking with us tonight. So I just wanted to highlight, and for whatever reason, it's showing you guys the small screen. Asifa South, if you're interested in connecting with them, asifa-south.com. You can get more information about the programs that they're offering. Whatever reason, I've just been having trouble with sharing my screen. But I hope that hearing about the power of animation as a tool of communication, a tool for diverse voices, diverse stories, a tool for representation will inspire you all to make an animation for the Fast Film Fest. Submissions are due Friday, March 5th, and we'll do a screening on March 19th. I want to just stress again, these are films that are 5 seconds to 5 minutes long. You can pack a lot into 5 seconds. You don't have to have drawing skills. You can use cutout magazines or cut up copies of photographs that you have to do your animations. And you can get resources. Is it showing? Is it still showing? Great. You can get resources on paper animation Film Fest YouTube channel. We've got lots of great tutorials, but we also have videos from folks that made animations in 1 or 2 hour workshops, so you can see what's possible. And we also have the submissions from the last 2 Fast Film Fests available on that YouTube channel. Let's see. And once again, this is sponsored by the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking, Georgia Tech Library, and Asifa South. We thank you all for coming to the event, and hope to see you at the screening on the 19th. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.